down here on level 1 so low you could parachute out of a snake's asshole.
Hey guys, this is going to be kind of a follow-up video to the stream I did with WPIG with ALT and Proper, where we live reacted to the DSP reacting to the DSP documentary by June the King. I guess we should thank the Kino boys, because without them we wouldn't have got this whirlwind of bullshit we've had the last month in the DSP vortex. It seems like every day Phil is trying to stir up more and more drama, from duty streams to low tier god. He's fucking fiending for drama right now. But let's start with the documentary and all the kind of nonsense that's come from it. Even before the documentary, Phil tried to play up the question, am I the character, or has it always been the real me? He even had that nonsensical joke he tried to make about the man on the moon being Andy Warhol or whatever. I don't fucking know what he was trying to say. He fucking gaslit himself into not understanding his own fucking joke somehow. I think it was obvious on the first day of the react that Phil was trying to play up this, oh, I was playing a heel, I was trying to cause drama in the FGC, which never really made any sense, to me at least, that he thought being a heel would bring attention to a really, really niche event like EVO or any of the other, tournaments he'd go to in New York City or whatever. Like, he'd somehow convinced himself in his own mind that by posting inflammatory comments online, he'd get how many extra people to show up to an arcade in New York City to play him in a Street Fighter match? Like, how many people was that he thought he was encouraging to watch by being the heel? And why do you want to be a heel? That doesn't make any sense, because I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of wrestling, but my understanding is the heel always loses. So we're supposed to believe that Phil wanted to play the character that always loses in an attempt to get people to show up to a niche event where there might only be 20 to 30 people. And he would do this by posting online in a forum, insulting people on the other side of the country. How the fuck did that doesn't make any sense. I think that's kind of why he gave up on that excuse or bullshit, at least, after the first day or so of his react. But I think one of the points I want to get into is kind of something I brought up in the last video. But who is the real Phil? Because just recently Phil started to say he's tired of hiding who he is and he wants to be his real self again. I know this is a question I've asked before, but is Phil putting on the clown makeup again? Or is he taking it off? Because he keeps talking about how he wants to bring back the King moniker, but he also doesn't want the negative stigma that comes from the King of Hate moniker. So it's like he's trying to have his cake and eat it too, right? So it's the return of the King, but the only time Phil's ever used the word King to describe himself is when he used the phrase the King of Hate to describe himself. And at the same time, he also claims this is the real him now. This is his real persona that he's been hiding for years. So if this is both who he really is, and at the same time a return to who he really is, then the narrative about him having been a heel in the fighting game community is entirely bullshit. Phil wants to be himself, the King of Hate, which he comes up with this bullshit excuse that I take the hate against me and I use it to fuel myself. Total lie. Total lie. He's the King of Hate because he hates on other people. I don't know who he thinks he's fooling. I know Howard has said it, but this guy watches too much wrestling to think that he can get away with this and people wouldn't notice what he's doing. So he wants to be the King of Hate, but he doesn't want the negative stigma that comes from that name. So he's simply implying that he's the King of Hate again by using the King moniker, but not saying it out loud, as if this gives him some sort of plausible deniability that no one would be able to see through, as if everyone who watches him is a fucking idiot and can't understand implications or subtleties, which, if you've seen any of the fucking interviews recently that Phil's done, yeah, he can't understand implications or subtleties. I mean, this whole fucking Keno Casino thing has just been two guys sneak dissing him and gassing him up so they can take their fucking prize pig to the state fair and show it off. And somehow Phil thinks that's them glazing him. Yeah, they're glazing up their ham before they fucking cook it in a fire, Phil. Oh, he's so fucking stupid at times. And we know it's the King of Hate that's returned because of all this drama shit he's doing. It's the same shit he did back in the day on the SRK forums and the Top Haters website and all that bullshit. He would call people out, he would say, fuck you, yada yada yada. And now we've got the same thing playing again. With the Craig interview where he's like, oh, yeah, and guess what, Craig? I'm not coming on your podcast, fuck you. And then he fucks it up. And of course, in typical Phil fashion, he fucks it up. And Craig didn't even hear him say fuck you because Phil's such a fucking coward. He had his finger hovering over the end call button and clicked it too early. Then we've got the entire RTU bullshit, which I don't even know the point of that. Phil did like a 4-hour stream where he dumped on the guy for RTU's June the King documentary. And then Phil does this like wrestling promo where he's like, I've taken Phil's last chip. I mean, he could have been standing next to The Rock during that fucking promo, and he wouldn't have looked out of place talking about, oh, I've taken RTU's last chip, and everyone's felted him, and he's ruined his life with his addictions. Without a fucking sense of irony, I know. And then this recent LTG drama where he's trying to like mind fuck LTG by insulting him so much that LTG gets so mad he agrees to show up on Phil's bullshit channel. Like what? Like Phil is actually in like elementary school with this kind of logic that I'm gonna force someone to play with me by calling him a fucking idiot. Like what? Like literal elementary grade kind of logic going on here. It's fucking mind-blowing how fucking dumb this guy is, and just like how poor he is with social cues and just social interactions in general. So the main thing I think that came out of the documentary is, of course, Phil's admission that he was, they call me DSP / down from the rafters / the gun show or whatever the other one was. And then that utterly nonsensical lie that he sold his account. It just makes no sense. Like, how are we supposed to believe that he sold his account? And he, of course, didn't give a date for this. He claims it was years ago, which doesn't make any sense. He claims he didn't actually sell it to a person. He sold it to a third-party website, and they then sold it to someone else. Which, if you add, multiple steps in that kind of transaction that goes from Phil not owning to the account to someone else owning the account, somehow it still has a continuous login streak over that time. That doesn't make any sense. And of course the idea that somehow this fucking moron figured out how to sell something through a black market web page. This guy can barely figure out how to work his fucking computer. This guy can barely figure out how to work his emails. The other day, he spent like an hour trying to deal with accidentally flagging PayPal as spam, and it ruined his whole fucking stream for the day because his emails that he was getting from his pay pigs that, said Shubbity Bubbity has donated $50 were actually going to a spam folder. It took him a whole fucking day to figure that out. And this fucking moron somehow figured out how to sell this on a website, like a black market website where you've got to give him a whole bunch of accounts and shit, and he was only going to sell it for a couple $100? How the fuck? That's the part I don't get, is that, first off, he's had 7 years to come up with a lie. Just to start with, he had 7 years to figure out a lie. More specifically, since the Side Scrollers interview 18 months ago, he's had to come up with something to excuse why he's been mad at Craig these 18 months, that was bullshit. Yeah, I lied to you, Craig, but please apologize for hurting my feelings. What? Fuck you. Anyway, but yeah, the idea that this guy, and then And since then, the Keno boys on the Knoll interview, they got Phil to jokingly admit he was down from the rafters, which everyone else in the call knew he was and called him out on it basically and bullied him into a fake admitting, even though everyone knew it wasn't a fake admission. A fucking idiot that he got tricked into that. So he's had since then to think of like a real fucking, like a good lie. So he's had 7 months or 7 years to think of a lie, 18 months to think of a plausible lie, and at least a month to think of a good one. And this is what he comes up with? It just boggles the mind. We're supposed to believe he sold the account pennies on the dollar as well? Like, does that make any sense with Phil's character? The guy that was trying to sell literally broken statues and collectibles from his old, what he called convention circuit, where he would buy, $500, $1,000 statues from conventions, and he was trying to sell them like at a 0% loss on eBay. That guy was willing to part ways with an account worth, or an account he'd spent by his own admission thousands of dollars, and if you believe TJ Gamebox, hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was going to sell that for maybe $100, $200 because he was going to be selling it to a third party who was then going to be selling it on, and so you lose some money there because they have to make money as well. This isn't making any fucking sense, man. But I think one of the things that, Phil was going on this thing about how, I've now admitted to it, so why would I be lying now? Well, first off, he's been lying for, according to this documentary, 20 years to fucking everyone and anyone about anything, especially when it comes to money. But the thing is, the only thing, it wasn't an admission of anything, though, because he came up with a new thing to say, well, the trolls didn't really get me. Like, the only thing he was willing to admit was that the trolls had figured out he had been playing the game under that account. Like, he wasn't even sorry he'd spent the money. I think one of the things he said, or I'll paraphrase, one of the things he said was, after a couple of years, they had redesigned the game, and that justified spending more time and money in the game. A couple of years after it came out, we were almost in the bankruptcy arc. And Phil's been saying recently, like, I'd be playing the game, I'd spend a couple $100 on the weekend, and they'd report on Twitter that I'd spent $1,200, so they were off by a factor of 4. As if that makes it any better, right? It's like, no, Phil's defense is, I didn't waste $200,000 on this stupid fucking Candy Crush mobile game. I wasted $50,000. When he says I'd only spend a couple $100 in the weekend, that would have been during times where we had shit like back in the day when Phil would have the, $1,500 tips goal that he wanted to raise in the first 10 days of each month so he could pay his bills. But at the same time, he's in those first 10 days, if it was 2 weekends, he would have spent $1,000 fucking dollars on this game by his own admission. And that's supposed to be somehow not be something worth apologizing for, even though he says the begging literally made his content unwatchable to him. Like, he's claimed, at least, I don't know if this is true. If anything, you shouldn't believe a fucking word Phil says. But he claims he's gone back and watched some of this stuff, and the begging was ruining my content. I was doing a charity stream. That was a Freudian slip. I was doing a fundraising stream, every month, which, oh my god, that literally happened. Every month he was doing a fundraising stream. Or he would be doing things like, guys, I've got a month to raise $1,500 extra so I can pay my bankruptcy attorney, and the case doesn't get thrown out, or whatever the fuck it was. He literally had a fundraiser to pay his bankruptcy attorney, even though it says in the bankruptcy filing that he was paying his bankruptcy attorney on credit, but he somehow needed to raise an extra $1,500 for something. Make it make sense, man. And we're supposed to believe he sold it for $100, please. Please. But like I said, he was never sorry about the money he spent on it. When he says things like, why would I keep lying? I've admitted to everything. No, the only thing he admitted to was the account being his at some point. And then he tries to, like, he's not even, like, when it comes to the money, like, the reason the account became an issue in the first place wasn't that someone had found an account that DSP was playing, because that's happened before. People knew he was playing other mobile games. The thing that made it amazing was when someone found the account and they worked out, I think it was the VIP levels, that account had spent tens of thousands of dollars. So the only reason this ever became an issue, Phil never addresses this, the reason it became an issue was because of how much money he was spending. By the time we found the account, he'd already spent tens of thousands of dollars. And then he keeps spending. And so this lie about, like, oh, I sold the account, but then I've opened up my own new personal account where I keep spending money at this, and he didn't qualify as like, I spend less money now because I have a personal account and it's different from my down from the rafter. No. According to him, he's spending the same money he's always spent on this game. And I mean, it was just a fucking lie when he told Craig and Adam, oh, I only spend a couple, $5, $10 a month. And then during this confession, inverted commas, he admits that, oh, I'd blow $300 in a weekend. Okay. That's sure, if that makes sense. And so, like, he never really set up a date for when he sold the account, which, again, this guy's a hoarder. There's no way he sold an account. This guy's not willing to sell a Machinima Xbox 360 for a couple $100 because it's too much effort. But he, like, set up multiple fake burner accounts to transfer his own mobile game account so that he could sell it to some third-party black market website. Like, how, just beyond belief. But another thing he does is he tries to conflate the selling of the account with his personal account with his new phone, which I've done some digging, looking up, quick searches on PigPigGo and stuff. Phil mentioning, iPhone, mobile games, that kind of stuff. And so what I found was this is a video from June 4th in 2023. You can see that Phil clearly has an iPhone here. He even calls it an iPhone. So we know it. So I think we can safely say the new phone he has, which let's show here. He shows off his new phone here, which is a Galaxy S23 or S24, people say. I think it's likely it's a 24 because we can see here on June 4th, that's an iPhone. There's a segment here, very brief segment. But we can examine it a little carefully. Don't get a good look at it, but you can see the little yellow or white tab at the top of the phone. I guess I don't have a good look here, but it looks kind of like the lock button on an iPhone, which is, I think, on that side. It's about the right position. So I think that's likely an iPhone, and this is from September 13th, 2023. And so here's August 17th, Phil talking about his iPhone.
Very, very exciting stories. Here we go. Let me get them up here. DSP News, which is read from my screen captures on my fucking iPhone. All right.
There's him mentioning his iPhone. And so this is a clip from October 15th, 2023.
Honest, I've always done advanced stuff on a Windows PC, right? I've had an iPad. I've had multiple iPhones. They're fine. But if I...
So maybe he got a new phone. And so I wanted to go back to this one. You can see here, which I think, at least in my quick searching on September 13th, 2023, you can see Phil holding it in his hand. And if you compare that to the picture we got here on the daily wrap, this is from Secret Limited's video, so sorry if the quality's not superb. So this is from the Secret Limited video. You can see it's still got this, that's definitely the iPhone, but you can see that that has the similar case. You can kind of make out like the little indentation on the side of the case where there's a little hole that shows the metallic case, which I think is kind of similar. If you look over here at the phone in Phil's hand, you can see there's a little cutout in the case for either the side button or the volume button or the silent tab thing. So I think it's safe to say that's definitely the iPhone. And so, yeah, I think the last time, and so I think the first time we actually saw his new phone was actually during the PC setup. Sorry, I don't have it pulled up here, but this is a much bigger view of it, which is very different from the iPhone, you can tell. And so I think it's possible, because he starts talking weirdly about iPhones in the fall of last year, so maybe it's possible for like Thanksgiving or Christmas he picked up a new phone. Unlikely. But yeah, he tries to claim that. Anyway, the main point is he's trying to conflate his new account with the new phone. But the new phone's at most a year old. But he says he sold the account multiple years ago. And he claims he hasn't played his new not down from the rafters account on his iPhone. But then he could have only sold the account this year? Question mark? I don't know. Something's not adding up. I don't know why. I don't know why I couldn't think of a better fucking lie, man. That's what I want to know. But yeah, he goes on, he mentions, why would I lie? Well, of course, he's a pathological liar. And I think it might be a little similar to the Boogie situation, where, Boogie gave that excuse as, I want to save the last bit of dignity I have. Could be something similar going on here with Phil. Possible. He tries to downplay how much he spent, by, of course, claiming that, the detractors were wrong by a factor of 3 or 4, as if $50,000 to $75,000 is acceptable on a addiction. I don't know. And of course, we've seen how he plays the game on stream. This guy's willing to spend hundreds of dollars. He was literally complaining that he didn't have a high enough account level to unlock the good polls, or the good, loot boxes, or whatever the fuck they really are, that cost $100 each. And we're supposed to believe this guy was only spending $100 an event or some shit? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, why did he lie? Well, what truth did he tell? He admitted the detractors found his account. He didn't admit to how much he spent. He never even gave a ballpark for that number. He said, I've spent, quite a bit of money. As if that tells you anything. As if that, I hate to keep coming back to this, but the whole reason the detractor community even cared in the first place was how much absurd amount of money he was spending on this shit. And of course, the other reason he might lie is so people stop tracking his account. That's the obvious one, right? Is if he finally... Because the thing that upset him the most about this situation, of course, isn't the $100,000 he spent, which, God, I can't imagine. I think my entire Steam library isn't even worth $10,000 at this point, and it's fucking 17 years old. But this guy's managed to spend $10,000 on a mobile fucking game. But I think he just wants detractors off of his back so he can spend as much as he wants on the game. That's a reason to lie and say, I've sold it, and hopefully convince the detractors to stop following his spending. That's one possibility. And also, I think it's possible he knows he has a new audience. And so there's some possibility he's trying to lie and confuse the situation so that no one really knows what's going on. So if you have his old pay pigs who trusted him when he said, I never played the game, you've got the detractors saying, he still plays the game, and he spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on it. And you've got these new Keno Casino guys, and he's able to convince them that, no, I've only spent a couple $10,000 on this game, and I got rid of the account. I don't have it anymore. There's no possible like cross communication there, because everyone has a completely different understanding of what's going on. And so maybe he's enough of a manipulator, maybe, to like plan out that every different group that now comprises the people who watch him, every one of them has a different story. And so if even, I guess, the fourth group of people who come in now after this redemption story, they'll hear so many different versions of this mobile game thing that they'll just ignore all of it, because no two people have a consistent story about what it is. And so maybe if you think Phil is enough of a manipulator, either intentionally or unintentionally, he's creating a situation where anyone new who shows up has no idea what the fuck the truth is, because there's so many different versions of the story. So that's another possible reason why he would lie about selling this account or whatever. That's another one. But yeah, like I said, he claims, why would I lie? I'm telling the truth now. But like, what truth did he tell? Like, the only thing, the way he phrased it, which I think was very telling, was that the detractors got me, that they call me DSP, was my account. But that, like I said, that was never really the issue. The issue was like how much money he's spending on this fucking game. He claims himself he'd blow $300, $400 in a weekend, come back the next Monday or whatever and say, guys, my wife is off tomorrow, I've got to go shopping, we need money or Jasper's gonna starve because I have to go to the pet store tomorrow. Like, I know the Keno guys don't give a shit, but when they're like, Phil hasn't killed anyone, his family's not addicted to crack cocaine. Yeah, but he's still a lying scumbag piece of shit who manipulates people to, like, steal their money. Like, are we supposed to say that's okay? I don't know. And then there's the bank leaks thing, which is, his defense of that is just objectively wrong. I don't know how else to say it. But like, his defense of why no one should believe the bank leaks. I did a fucking video about this, you idiots. This is why you don't say dumb shit. He brought up the fucking pet store thing, where for some reason people were out there claiming that the fucking bank leaks show that Phil was spending $100, $200 every time he went to the pet store. It didn't show that. So, I guess that technically disproves Phil's claim that he looked up the bank leaks and read some of the documents about them. He clearly didn't. He read some fucking dent tractor who repeated some bullshit lie that he fucking heard from the grapevine or something. But no, Phil was spending like $20 to $30 every time he went to the pet store. It's completely acceptable. But like, that was one of Phil's like, I don't spend $100 at the pet store. Yeah, the bank leaks didn't say that, so one of your points is completely invalid. But then he brings up, and this was a very, I don't know if I want to say clever, but thought out bullshit excuse he said about why the bank leaks were wrong. So he brings up how detractors, notice how he talks about a detractor theory here to disprove why the bank leaks are wrong, but he brings up the detractor theory that used to exist, which I've shown enough evidence that no one should believe this anymore. If you go and listen to the beginning of the WPIG stream I was on with Prophet and ALT, where we reacted to one of his parts, but Phil does not pay for WWE Champions through PayPal. So originally, people thought he did before we got the bank leaks. And so Phil brought up that theory that Phil wanted tip money because it would go straight to his PayPal, and then he would pay for WWE Champions through his phone linked to his PayPal account. And so Phil's question is, well, if the detractor theory is true, why would it show up on the bank leaks? Well, there's an obvious answer to that one. The detractor theory was false, and Phil has proved it false. Phil has said himself he has his bank account linked to his WWE account that he plays on stream. He said that much. So the detractors made a false assumption that Phil was paying for the game through PayPal. And Phil uses that theory that's now been debunked to disprove the bank leaks, which is like a mind-blowing, that's just a mind-blowing, like, logical leap, like, bullshit. I don't even know what the right word for it is. Just, like, utter nonsensical counter. Like, he's using the fact that detractors came up with a theory before the bank leaks happened to explain how he pays for the game, to disprove the bank leaks, even though Phil himself said at that time the detractor theory about him using PayPal was wrong. He said recently that he has his bank account linked to his WWE account. So that's just a completely bullshit excuse. Or, not bullshit excuse, a bullshit, like, counter-argument. Like, he's basing his entire counter-argument on, like, there is a troll theory that says this. The bank leaks disprove the troll theory, so somehow that means the bank leaks are wrong. Not that the troll theory was wrong, which was the more logical solution. And then, of course, he gets, I think, another terrible argument, which is, I got away with the bankruptcy, therefore it was fucking set up correctly or something. Like, I didn't lie because I got away with it, which is narcissism. Just complete narcissism. Definitely the phrasing of someone, I don't know if he has a guilty conscience that can apply to someone with narcissism who's like a lying scumbag piece of shit who manipulates and who steals from fucking everyone. So I don't think it's actually like a guilty conscience, but I don't know, duper's delight, maybe? Is that the narcissist version of a guilty conscience? Is duper's delight? But yeah, like his third argument about like, oh, I got away with it. They didn't catch me. Even though he brings up multiple times about how he had so many different things wrong, that the trolls were able to report to the bankruptcy court multiple times, and he had to refile and resubmit and multiple addendums to fix mistakes he had made, or they're not mistakes, they were lies with plausible deniability. That's not a mistake. But yeah, and then he claims like, oh, I went over it line by line by line with everyone in the bankruptcy, even though it was a personal bankruptcy, so he never actually went over line by line his business expenses. Nancy said during the 341 call that she wanted his PayPal statements, but his PayPal statements never include any of his business expenses. So those don't actually show anything. So even if he went over those by line, they'd just be deposits in forms of tips and outgoings to his bank account. That's all PayPal shows, or it would show for Phil. So you wouldn't actually be able to track any of his spending. And essentially, I brought this up during the React, but essentially the reason Phil was able to get away with it is because it appears like he's been committing tax fraud for 15 years, which actually, if you put it all together, you end up with, that's probably why his tax guy in Connecticut, quote, screwed him with the state tax thing, is that Phil's been committing tax fraud possibly for 15 years. He's been lying to everyone about the nature of his business, how he gets his money, what money he gets, what money he spends on the account, and that kind of stuff. So even if you believe Phil's lie about, I went over it line by line, he went over the personal stuff line by line. The stuff that comes to not the $5,000 a month in business expenses, but the $5,000 a month in personal expenses, which is fucking wild. That a guy that lives with one woman and one cat has $5,000 a month in personal expenses, and he's only got a $1,400 mortgage. Like, dear God. But yeah, the bankruptcy was never gonna, I think because he's lying about his taxes, he was able to get away with the bankruptcy, because the bankruptcy was never going to investigate him for tax fraud. They basically just took everything he submits to the IRS as true. And so that was, and another thing about the, like, oh, I can't explain my $5,000 a month. No one needs to know, and besides, I don't know what to do with it. And besides, it's all correct because I submit it to my tax guy for $1,500 a year to solve my taxes and do it right. And so it can't be wrong. But Phil wants like a plausible deniability of like, oh, I have the tax guy do it, but the tax guy doesn't just come up with numbers, right? Like the tax guy doesn't just look at your bank statement and just randomly start picking off every expense on there and say, rolls of dice. Okay, this one's a business expense. Oh, I rolled a 1. This one's a personal expense. Oh, I rolled a 20. This one's a business expense. No, you have to tell him what is and what isn't a business expense, what the nature of your business is. And so I think one of the things that I know for sure happened, I guess I don't actually know for sure, but I would be willing to bet 5 fake internet dollars on this, that one of Phil's business expenses is part of his mortgage, and he included the entire mortgage under his personal expenses in the bankruptcy. So he probably counted 150% of his mortgage in the bankruptcy filing. So, yeah, he's not a lying sack of shit, sure. But yeah, that's essentially how he was able, like his argument that, and so essentially none of his fucking arguments about the bankruptcy make any fucking sense. He's saying, I went over it line by line, but I don't actually know how any of it's calculated because I give it all to my tax guy. But you have to tell the tax guy what is and isn't a business expense. Like, that's why you pay them, is that you tell them what to look for and then they look for it. They don't, like, how could he possibly know what is and isn't a business expense without Phil telling him? When he uses everything on the same credit card or debit card or whatever, like, how was that possible? Who fucking knows, man? So, yeah, Phil is pretending like he admitted to anything during this, but he didn't admit to shit. Like, the only thing he admitted, in his own words, is that the trolls got him, that it was his account originally. But he's still playing the game, he's still spending money. He's now, if you believe him, he's now opened 3 different accounts. He's spending money on all of them, like a fucking whale. Like, he's already spent, like $500, $600 on his business account. Oh, and that was another thing about the phone, was I wonder if because we know he got the phone recently, and all of this business and personal expenses and business expenses and $5,000 a month. I wonder if he's trying to set it up, because he talked about his phone, and he said, oh, this new phone I've got, it's where I do all of my business from, and yeah, I play a few personal games, but it's where I conduct all of my business. And so it makes you wonder, is he actually trying to, like, legitimize claiming all of his WWE shit as a business expense by saying, oh, I've got an account that I play now on stream for the business, and I've got a business phone, or phone I do all of my business on. And so he's going to intentionally muddy the waters and try and make it so that it becomes even harder to find out that he's lying for the IRS. And again, unfortunately, I don't think the IRS is ever going to care that he's committed 15 years of tax fraud, because again, I mean, as much money as he's made and as much money as he's wasted and as little as he has to show for it, we're talking, he's cheated the IRS out of what, $50,000, $100,000. I know that's a lot of money, but I mean, they got bigger fish to fry. And that's what the salary of one guy who would have to investigate Phil and his 15 years of bullshit. And so what, they'd collect by the end of it, what, $10,000 or some shit? I don't think they'll ever get him. They'll ever waste their time. Unlikely. And even then, I don't even know, and back to the WWE thing, even then, I don't know. Like, he said, oh, I'm sorry, I lied to you and said I wasn't down from the rafters, or they call me DSP. But, like, what does that even mean? Like, what's that an apology for? And so, okay, I want to just briefly mention some of the interview bullshit. So we had that interview with Kino Casino, which was fucking awful. It was just Phil giving a fucking pre-stream. I already did a video about that one, but you could tell the first couple of seconds when they tried to do that joke about, oh, Phil felt the detractors with this, what's your favorite ice cream? And then Phil gave him a fucking 10-minute pre-stream about not picking his favorite ice cream, and those two fucking morons got fucking felted by DSP. And then there was the Noel interview, which, God, it sucked so much. They wasted like 30 minutes trying to fucking bully Phil into banning Derek, which is, I mean, I get it, it's content, and Derek's a piece of shit, and so who cares if he leaves? But, I mean, it's just a waste of time for them, really. I mean, it's not gold dust, really. Although I guess they probably never expected it would take 30 minutes to fucking bully Phil into banning fucking Derek. And Phil's excuse of, I think the thing they never really addressed was, why was Phil so interactive with this guy? That's the one that, like, no one really asked Phil, and I wish they had. Because they brought up the, like, detractor theories about, Derek's mom pays Phil, or Derek is a moderator, or Derek does Phil's thumbnails, but like that's not even, like, the real question is, why is Phil talking to Derek in emails about, like, his day and stuff, and like, Derek sends him emails about, like, what was it? He went to, like, Taiwan or something, and was sending Phil updates about his vacations. Like, what? Why is Phil interacting with this guy that much? Like, it's one thing to have this guy, like, in chat being a creep. It's another thing to be responding to his emails behind the scenes. I don't know. I kind of wish they had brought that stuff up, because that's the weirder part, is because Phil claims he's heard all of this stuff before. And if you have, like, why are you responding to this guy in emails? Like, what? I don't know, but whatever. It was content for us. It was embarrassing for Phil. It was content for us. I can't complain too much. But I don't know, just a couple things about Noel. I know it's a little late, but Noel was a little dishonest during that interview. When he's talking about, like, it's a good thing I keep the website up, because if I didn't keep the DSP forums up, they would go to the dark web and they'd be sending contract killers after you, Phil. Bullshit, but whatever. But just complete bullshit, because the Dear Feeder has closed down the DSP forum multiple times. Okay, so I don't know why Noel lied. Like, the last time it got closed down was when Phil's fat fucking wife showed up, and someone tagged Noel in the DSP thread and said, Dear Feeder, you will be happy to know DSP has a fat fucking feeder wife. And Dear Feeder was offended by this and closed down the website for, like, or the DSP forum for, like, a week, and then put up a whole bunch of draconian rules about who can even fucking post in there, and yada yada yada. Well, Noel himself says he doesn't give a fuck about DSP, so I guess it's like, this is one of the things DSP does, is you have to know the lore to know why DSP is a piece of shit. Like, if you just watch one or two streams, you're like, it's a boring guy, he has nothing to say, he gets mad once in a while, and then he asks for money. Like, what's so interesting here, right? So I can see why someone like Noel, who's got, 100 fucking different people at least on that fucking website. I don't know, it just seems weird that the guy who fucking was the handler for Chris Chan for years can't understand why DSP is a lolcow, but whatever. Then there was the fucking Keemstar interview. I couldn't watch that. I'm sorry, I don't have much commentary on that one. I watched maybe 15-20 minutes of that, and it was just two guys glazing each other's balls. A waste of time. You had Keemstar fucking glazing DSP's balls so he could get them eventually on the Lolcow Live podcast. And you had DSP glazing fucking Keem's balls so he could have a guy that's higher up on the social ladder that he can, like, talk to and get things from, basically. Which we saw with the fucking duty thing and the recent LTG drama, where it feels like, I talked to I'm now best friends with Keemstar. I'm Keemstar's right-hand man. And I asked him, LTG, about the offer he gave you. And so that was the only reason Phil, like, fucking deep-throated Keemstar in that interview. And I only saw the first 20 minutes, and that's what it was. I'm sorry to all the people that watched that whole fucking thing. That must have been awful. And then there was the Craig interview, which I'm sure everyone's seen by now, but Phil he fucking embarrassed himself, man. I know, like, the Kino boys are all up in the comment section of the clips and shit for that video that Phil put up, and they're saying, good job, King, when you fucked up insulting him and closing the call, he didn't even hear it, but good job, King. Oh my god, what are you guys doing? At least come up with better stuff. But, I mean, it's just amazing how much Phil, what did Phil think was happening? Like, he has become the king of delusion. Like, he thought, I'll get you, Craig. You admitted that you didn't check your email for 23 hours. What would have changed, man? That's the first thing is, when Phil ended the interview, he said he had to check with his wife and consider his options to see if it was safe enough to send Craig the name of his WWE Champions account. So, of course, Craig didn't check it that night because Phil didn't say he was going to send it that night. Fucking moron. And Phil's biggest thing is like, oh, because he seems to be implying that if he had sent Craig the information that proved he wasn't down from the rafters because he had sold his account, even though he still had an iPhone at that time, and his new account is on the Android. Don't think about it. It doesn't make any sense because it's a fucking lie. But he was somehow going to send Craig proof of something, even though the proof he was going to send him was going to prove that Phil had lied during the interview. So what would have changed? Like, let's imagine for a second. After that night, Craig reads the email where Phil says, I'm only 50-50 about sending you the information that proves I'm a liar and that I lied to you during this interview. And this time it will be the truth. Okay. And Craig responds, okay, Phil, send me the information. And Phil sends whatever information it is that proves somehow, with what information it somehow was going to involve an Apple account. Make that make sense. Because apparently Phil has the account on his not Apple phone. And his new account is on the not Apple phone. But he was going to use the Apple Game Center information to prove that, okay, sure, we'll say it. Somehow Phil compiled a dossier of bullshit that proved down from the rafters was no longer his. So what happens the next day? Nothing changes. At best, Craig has a 10-minute thing at the beginning where he says, yeah, don't worry, guys. Phil showed me the evidence. He's a lying sack of shit. He lied during the interview. And then he goes on and reads super chats. Like, nothing would have changed. And Phil kept going on about, like, oh, you wanted the scoop. You wanted to be the place where people went to see that you had felted me and you'd got my confession. Man, why would they care? That's the thing that's never made any sense. It's like Phil's persecution complex. Like, why would side scrollers care, man? They had no idea. They didn't even know the Keemstar thing was the you versus Keemstar on that podcast was going to happen. But they had this grand conspiracy before that even happened, where they were going to fucking get you to confess to a mobile game they'd never fucking heard of, where they don't even know like half of the evidence that ended up proving it was you. Please, man. And then what are they going to do the next day when they find out, like, oh yeah, Phil wasn't down from the rafters, so that mobile game thing isn't true. And then what? Our detractor's not going to send them donations. They were reading donations they got during the interview from the day before. Like, nothing would have changed. So I don't know what Phil's like, oh, you need to apologize for hurting my... And like, I keep saying like... And so Phil's big issue is that supposedly everyone who watched, or anyone who's ever going to watch the interview, is going to have their perception of the interview by the follow-up decompression stream after it, which has less viewers. So how the fuck is everyone going to have their mind made up by like a donation reading stream? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And then Phil, that stupid fucking line about like, well, why do I have to apologize for lying? I gave you guys 5 hours of my time and I answered all your questions. Well, Phil, you lied. Yeah, but I answered all the questions. You know, if you lied, you didn't answer them. Anyway, but yeah, so I don't know what the fuck that Craig thing was. Oh, and then the fucking June interview, which is just a waste of everyone's time. I mean, nothing happened. I mean, June was just completely checked out of that, and he was giving one-word answers. Phil would ask a fucking 10-minute question. June would give a one-word, sometimes one-sentence answer. And then Phil would go back on and give a 5-minute response of what he wanted the answer to be. It's just a total fucking waste of time, man. Like, I don't I don't know why anyone's agreeing to be on these fucking interviews with him, man. Like, if you've seen so hopefully, like, I don't know why he's getting anyone to agree to this stuff. I don't know. But yeah, Phil's, these days, he's trying to claim that, I've admitted to everything, so, everything in the interview is no longer pertinent. It's like, well, A, you didn't admit to anything. You admitted the detractors were right somehow, but you still admit to playing the fucking game? So how exactly is it no longer pertinent? And his excuse for the bank leaks and all that bullshit was like, oh, I got away with it. I don't know how that means it's no longer pertinent. Yeah, he's now become, drama alert gaming, basically.